Well, Nancy. What's with that getup? Patricia, the mother of my daughter Betty's classmate, looked me up and down in my work clothes and said that in a mocking tone. This is Betty's mom? Poor people are so miserable, not even getting a day off, said Patricia's husband, Mark, looking down on me with contemptuous eyes. About Betty's mom. What? Did that pauper say something rude? What? You don't know her? All this time, you should realize that you two are the ones being rude. When the governor said that in exasperation. Huh? What do you mean? Mark replied, seeming not to understand. So the governor said irritably. You know nothing, do you? Nancy is well known in this area, no, in this whole region, for being good at her job. I'm Nancy, 32 years old. I'm a single mother with a daughter who's in 6th grade. When I was 20, I gave birth to a baby girl with my ex-husband Paul, whom I had been dating since high school, and we named her Betty. We were still young, so we started our married life with a lot of support from those around us, but we had no time to enjoy being married and struggled with parenting our first child. Paul, who loved driving, got a job as a truck driver after graduating from high school. At first, he drove short and medium distances, but gradually he was entrusted with long-distance routes that came with allowances. Even though Paul initially helped out a little with housework and childcare, he was never good at that kind of thing to begin with, and when he was tired from work, he stopped helping out at all. Before I knew it, I was always doing everything from housework to childcare all by myself. Neither of us had any emotional leeway, and we started arguing frequently about housework and childcare. We lost the feelings we had for each other when we were dating. All we did was fight in front of Betty, never showing her our smiles as parents. I started to think that Betty wouldn't be happy in a home like that, so I told Paul how I felt, and it turned out he had been thinking the same thing. After many discussions, Paul and I got divorced when Betty was 2 years old. Paul agreed to pay as much child support as he could afford out of his salary, which he has continued to do to this day. After the divorce, I decided to work to make a living, but the first thing I needed to do was find a daycare center where I could leave Betty. Daycare centers vary in terms of hours, fees, and other conditions, and the daycare center you can use also changes depending on your job. After some thought, I decided to find a job first and ask my mom to watch Betty until I could get her into a daycare center. My dad passed away from illness when I was 2, and since then, my mom has raised me as a single mother. When I was 15, my mom remarried a very kind man. He became my stepfather, and as a teenager, I didn't get used to him right away, but he was a warm person who embraced me gently as if I were his own child. He wasn't a very large man, but he worked operating heavy machinery at construction sites. When I was still in high school, I had to deliver something to my dad's workplace at my mom's request, and that was the first time I saw him operating the heavy machinery with both dynamism and delicacy. At that moment, I thought my dad looked so cool and felt proud. I job hunted and started working as a building cleaner, searched for many daycare centers, and somehow managed to get Betty into one that met our needs. Having struggled to find a daycare center, I realized anew just how much mothers with young children agonize over balancing work and childcare. One day, construction began on a vacant lot next to where I was working as a cleaner, and it suddenly reminded me of my dad's job. Strangely, I found myself wanting to try operating heavy machinery too. I noticed my heart dancing with a feeling akin to certainty that I could do it. From then on, other options vanished from my mind, and I headed to my dad's place that very day. When I asked my dad one question after another, my eyes shining, about wanting to become a heavy equipment operator and where to start, he was surprised at first but happily taught me all sorts of things. I also learned that the number of female heavy equipment operators has been increasing lately, which made me even more motivated. First, I got my CDL license, and my dad introduced me to a construction company run by an acquaintance of his, where I was able to get a job as an office worker and heavy equipment operator. Until Betty started elementary school, it was difficult to go to job sites due to the hours of her preschool, so I worked at a materials storage site operating a shovel car to process leftover soil. Meanwhile, I acquired licenses for various types of heavy equipment and then gradually gained experience by going to job sites. However, after several years with that company, they changed their policy and stopped taking on-site construction jobs. Wanting to improve my skills, I made the bold decision to go independent and become a sole proprietor. As I continued working on-site, I discovered a new world as a heavy equipment operator and found myself stepping into it. Betty joined the marching band at her elementary school. A marching band is a group that plays instruments like trumpets while walking, sometimes parading with dance teams and color guards. Our elementary school has won the state competition in the past and is fairly well known in the community. By the way, the color guard is the part that has the role of colorfully expressing aspects that can't be fully conveyed through just music and marching by waving flags and dancing. "Mom, I want to join the marching band," Betty said. "The marching band?" I replied. When Betty said she wanted to join after being invited by a friend, I couldn't afford to buy her an instrument yet, but my job was relatively stable and I thought I could manage the cost of lessons somehow, so I agreed to let her try it for a year for now. More than anything, I felt guilty for making Betty feel lonely because I'm usually working, so I had a strong desire to happily support anything she wanted to do. "Betty, if you're going to do it, put your heart into it," I told her. "Yeah, I'll do my best," she replied with a happy smile. Though she joined the marching band after being invited, before long Betty became even more passionate about it than the friend who invited her, and she cheerfully practiced with her bandmates every day. At our elementary school, it's become a tradition for the marching band to do an entrance parade and a performance on the field at the opening ceremony of the sports day every year. About 6 months before the sports day, as the 6th graders graduated and advanced to the next grade, it was time to select a drum major to lead the entire marching band. The drum major is chosen from the oldest 6th graders, so Betty's grade was eligible. "We'll be choosing a new drum major again this year, so everyone think about who you want to select." The students seemed to view the selection of a new drum major as a kind of festival, constantly talking about it before and after the vote, saying things like, "Who are you choosing? It's a secret, we're not supposed to say." The drum major is essentially the leader, conducting with a baton that has a metal ball on the end and sometimes twirling the baton to perform. The position also requires social skills, leadership, and athleticism. It's a role everyone aspires to. They also have the important responsibility of organizing the members and formation of each instrument section and the stage composition. The subdrum major, who is also a candidate for the next drum major, is chosen from both 5th and 6th graders. Last year, Betty was selected when she became a 5th grader. At our elementary school, the selection method for both drum major and subdrum major involves a vote by all band members, with the final decision made by the advisor's judgment. The student chosen is considered to have the deep trust of the band members and be recognized as having the aptitude for leadership. "Mom, guess what? I was chosen as subdrum major," Betty told me. Having been honored with the position of subdrum major, Betty earnestly took on the role of supporting the drum major in leading the band members. And so, the vote was held to choose the drum major from among Betty and her fellow 6th graders, but something different from usual happened this year. Dorothy, the daughter of a locally famous company president, suddenly joined as a 6th grader and barged her way into the drum major candidates. Dorothy had joined the marching band in 6th grade with the sole purpose of becoming drum major. Patricia, the president's wife, insisted that Dorothy was qualified to be drum major because she was a 6th grader, forcefully putting Dorothy among the candidates. To the advisor, who was at a loss with how to handle such audacity, "Dorothy has a great personality, she's cute, and she's popular with everyone, so it's practically decided that she'll be chosen, right? Betty is a bit plain, or should I say, has an air of poverty about her, you know?" Patricia reportedly declared Dorothy's victory with full confidence. However, it's said that Dorothy often acted arrogantly towards her classmates, boasting about being the daughter of the president of a major local real estate company. If she didn't like someone, she would use her friends to ostracize them or spread rumors, constantly engaging in misdeeds. It's hard to say that someone like Dorothy is popular. Naturally, Dorothy, not only a newcomer but also someone who behaved that way, didn't gain the trust of those around her and was not chosen as the marching band leader. In the end, Betty was selected as drum major from the 6th grade, and a reliable and popular girl from 5th grade was chosen as subdrum major. A few days later, a meeting was held to report the decision on drum major and explain the marching band's plans for the new year. I was able to attend as my work schedule allowed. Patricia, whose expectations were betrayed, burst into the classroom, ran straight to the advisor without even glancing at those around her. "It's ridiculous that Dorothy wasn't chosen. There must have been some unfair play. Did Betty give everyone something?" And she frantically expressed her opinion. Unable to ignore such offensive remarks, I interjected. "Now, Patricia, isn't that rude to say, no matter what? I didn't raise Betty to do something like that. Oh my, having a poor girl as drum major will ruin the marching band's glory up until now. Shouldn't it be natural for her to decline, knowing her place?" Patricia said something even more insulting. Feeling I absolutely couldn't let this humiliation of Betty stand, I tried to argue back. "That's not true. There was no unfair play. Betty isn't that kind of child, and we held a proper vote that was open for all to see during the ballot counting." But the advisor clearly stated for me. At that. "So then why wasn't Dorothy chosen? You make the final decision, right, teacher? Why didn't you choose Dorothy?" Patricia barraged the advisor with questions. "Well, of course, the voting results showed that Betty won by a landslide. And Betty has the leadership necessary for a drum major. More than anything, she has the trust of her peers. Plus, Betty is on the taller side, so everyone can see her conducting easily, which makes the band itself look better too." The advisor regretted saying too much, even if it was the truth, but Patricia turned beet red and shouted, "What did you say? So you're saying Dorothy isn't trusted by others, she's short, and looks bad?" "Oh, no. That's not what I meant at all. There are many other kids who weren't chosen too. Not being selected doesn't mean they're inferior." The advisor tried to smooth things over, but Patricia said, "That's enough. We'll continue this discussion another time." With that, she left in a huff without participating in the meeting. The other parents exchanged glances, some looking displeased, and for a moment the room was in an uproar. But the advisor took control and proceeded with the meeting matter-of-factly, so the roughly 90-minute meeting ended in a calm atmosphere as if the earlier commotion had never happened. However, after that, things that seemed like harassment from someone started happening to Betty and I. First, the baton Betty used for practice went missing, so she couldn't practice. After searching all over, it was found placed in the garbage dump in the backyard. Then rumors spread that Betty had cheated to become drum major. In a horrible case, the marching band practice schedule changed, but only Betty wasn't informed. Various forms of harassment causing real harm occurred. It got so bad that when I consulted the advisor, he said, "This is troubling. There's no evidence, so we can't specify who's responsible. But I'll keep a closer eye out too." During band practice, he apparently told the kids, "Lately, someone has been bothered by malicious harassment. If anyone has information, please report to the teacher. This is absolutely unacceptable." I could only hope it would serve as at least a small warning to the perpetrators. And such incidents started happening not only to Betty, but to me as well. As a sole proprietor heavy equipment operator, I take on-site jobs from construction companies and such. But a little after the uproar at that meeting, multiple companies started saying they wanted to cancel their orders with me. Even when I asked the reason for the cancellation, none of the companies would give me a clear answer. I became convinced there must be a mastermind behind this, so I decided to consult my dad, who has many long-standing connections in the industry. When I explained the current situation in detail, my dad's expression changed, realizing it was no trivial matter. He agreed to take action too. Even amidst such unsettling days, Betty, looking forward to conducting the marching band she loved, diligently practiced with the members every day. She also stayed late by herself to practice the drum major's baton performance, a highlight of the marching band. And finally, the day before the sports festival arrived. I had been really looking forward to the marching band parade at the opening ceremony, but as bad luck would have it, there was trouble at the site I was in charge of. I had to go to work from early morning to deal with it. I hoped to make it in time for the 9:30 a.m. opening ceremony, but depending on the site conditions, I might not be able to see Betty's performance in the worst case. "Betty, I'm sorry. I might not make it to the opening ceremony tomorrow," I said, feeling terribly guilty. "It can't be helped, it's for work. I know you're doing your best for me, Mom." Surely Betty wants me to see her as drum major, yet she says something so grown-up like that. "I'm really sorry. But if work finishes early, I might still make it in time." "Yeah." Betty nods, looking a little less cheerful. "I'll call from the company when it's time for you to wake up. I'll make breakfast and your lunch. I feel bad having you go alone, but make sure you lock up properly." I instruct Betty, confirming each point one by one. On the day of, when I got to the work site, the trouble seemed likely to be resolved sooner than I expected, which reassured me. However, even so, I'd be cutting it close to make the opening ceremony. I definitely didn't have time to stop by the house to change. Deciding that making it to the opening ceremony took priority, I rushed to the school straight from the site, still in my work clothes. Somehow I arrived at the school a little before the opening ceremony started, but there was a frantic atmosphere and the teachers seemed on edge for some reason. I quickly found out why. I overheard someone nearby saying that apparently the student in the drum major position still hadn't arrived, and at this rate the marching band's entrance would be delayed. Why? Betty should have gone to school properly. There's no way she still wouldn't be here. I hurriedly tried calling home, but of course no one answered. What should I do? Something must have happened to Betty. There's no way Betty would be late on such an important day. My knees trembled and I felt like collapsing on the spot. Just then, someone spoke to me in a crude, tactless, loud voice. Oh my, Nancy, what's the matter? In that getup? It was Patricia who said that mockingly, looking me up and down in my work clothes. Standing next to Patricia was her husband Mark, the president of some company. This is that Betty's mom? Poor people are so miserable, not even getting a day off. Mark said, looking down on me with contemptuous eyes. But now wasn't the time to deal with the likes of them. I didn't even have the energy to feel annoyed. Utterly oblivious to the mood, Patricia gloated triumphantly. I wonder what's going on with Betty. For a drum major, how slovenly of her not to show up even this late. She has no right to conduct. Isn't it great that Dorothy is here? The teacher should have chosen Dorothy from the start. Well, once they see Dorothy conduct, everyone will have no choice but to acknowledge her ability, Mark chimed in. Patricia and Mark spoke as if Dorothy would be serving as drum major. Huh? I found out later that on the day before the sports festival, the parents of the 5th grade sub-drum major had contacted the advisor and suddenly said they wanted their child to resign from the position. When asked the reason, they simply said it was because their child no longer wanted to do it, and they wanted to respect the child's feelings. At that very moment, Patricia conveniently visited the teacher and apparently made a point of saying that Dorothy had been practicing for the drum major role and was ready for the actual performance. It would be a big problem if there was no replacement if Betty came down with a cold on the day of the sports festival, right? I think Dorothy is the perfect fit, she said, pressuring him to make Dorothy the sub-drum major. With no time to redo the selection process, the teacher had no choice but to appoint Dorothy as sub-drum major, strictly as a stand-in for the drum major. I found it hard to believe that the sub-drum major's resignation, Dorothy's appointment as sub-drum major, and Betty not having arrived yet were all unrelated. Just as I was about to pursue the truth behind this, my cell phone rang. I answered the phone nervously. Hello, what? I'm at the school right now. The call was from Betty's homeroom teacher. Apparently, Betty was with the governor and the mayor, and she was looking for me. The teacher seemed relieved to hear I was already at the school. He said he would relay that to the governor for now and contact me again later, then hung up. Why? Betty was with the governor and the mayor? And looking for me? I was at a loss, my mind blank. In any case, it seemed clear that something had happened. A few minutes later, I got another call on my cell phone, this time from the marching band advisor. I just heard from Betty's homeroom teacher that Betty is on her way to school in the governor's car. Even more confused by this, all I could manage to say was, Betty is what? Yes, I'm sorry. Thank you for your help. According to what I heard later, people had apparently commented that it was unusual for Betty, who always arrived early for marching band practice, not to show up for a while this morning. Then, with no word from her, less than 10 minutes before the opening ceremony, Betty still hadn't arrived. The advisor finally thought something was off and called my house, but no one answered. He was looking up my cell phone number to try calling it next when Betty's homeroom teacher phoned to inform him that Betty was with some unexpected people. Those people turned out to be the governor and the mayor. The governor, who had graduated from this elementary school, had managed to make time to come to the sports festival by car with the mayor, whose schedule happened to allow it. On the way, they spotted a girl who looked somewhat familiar crying and running in the opposite direction of the school. They stopped the car and called out to her. When they asked what was going on, the girl said, "My mom is in trouble. I have to go home," and tried to run off again. That girl turned out to be Betty. Why did the governor know Betty's face? Well, I had previously had the opportunity to meet directly with the governor and the mayor, and I had brought Betty with me. Betty had left a bright impression on them. They also remembered that Betty attended the governor's elementary school alma mater. The governor, upon hearing that Betty's mom was in trouble, thought it sounded serious. He first called the school and asked them to get in touch with me, intending to decide the next steps based on the outcome. And that's why the teacher had called me earlier. When the governor learned from Betty's homeroom teacher's return call that I was safe and already at the school, he told Betty, "Betty, your mom is okay. She's already at the school." When he asked why she thought her mom was in trouble, "Lisa told me that my mom is in trouble, so I should go home." Betty, having calmed down a bit, apparently explained. Then, remembering the sports festival entrance parade, Betty started to panic, saying, "What should I do? I'm going to be late for the opening ceremony." The governor let Betty ride along in his car and brought her to the school. So, the advisor, having been informed by Betty's homeroom teacher, told me that Betty was on her way here. I felt so thankful to God. While this was happening, the scheduled start time for the opening ceremony arrived, and the teachers began to bustle about. Then suddenly, a whistle pierced the sky. Next, the sound of drums began to steadily beat out a rhythm. "Now, let's begin the opening ceremony. It's time for the marching band to enter." The teacher made a cheerful announcement over the microphone, and the marching band entered through the school gate. I saw Betty confidently swinging the conductor's baton. "How?" Patricia and Mark were dumbfounded. Dorothy wasn't at the head of the marching band. She was walking in the back, waving a flag baton with a sulky look on her face. Her movements didn't match the rhythm of the music. It seemed she was just swinging it randomly. Betty, the drum major, had assigned Dorothy the color guard part, but apparently the sullen Dorothy hadn't practiced properly. Perhaps she had been certain she would get to conduct as drum major today, but her expectations were dashed. As the marching band entered the schoolyard, they moved vertically and horizontally across the schoolyard stage while playing their instruments, putting on a performance that visually entertained the audience as well. Well, there was one member disrupting the formation. But still, overall, the marching band's performance was magnificent. Seeing Betty conducting with a proud look, I couldn't help but tear up. I remembered how Betty had diligently practiced despite various interferences. Patricia and Mark had such frustrated looks on their faces, but as the opening ceremony ended, they noticed someone approaching and addressed them in a fawning voice. "Oh, isn't it the governor and the mayor? Long time no see. Are you here to observe the sports festival today?" Being the president of a major real estate company in this area, he was probably acquainted with the governor and mayor. The governor said, "Ah, yes," giving them a glance. "Actually, my daughter was supposed to conduct the marching band, but a pauper got carried away and it turned into a dull parade." Then he said with a terribly displeased tone. The governor and mayor ignored Mark and Patricia and called out to me with a smile. "Wow, Betty did a wonderful job conducting." "Yes, she's tall so she looks good, and she skillfully brought everyone together." Seeing the two of them praising Betty, Mark and Patricia looked more surprised that the governor and mayor knew me than feeling bitter. "Governor, mayor, I'm so sorry that Betty caused you trouble." "What? What happened?" Patricia made a puzzled face. "Yes, someone told Betty the wrong information that I was in trouble, and they found Betty running home and gave her a ride to school." Patricia's face began to change color. No, it was no trouble at all. I'm glad she made it in time." The governor said that, then furrowed his brow. "Still, I just can't get it off my mind, someone telling Betty something like that." The governor and mayor took issue with the incident of Lisa telling Betty that her mom was in trouble so she should go home. They immediately brought it up with the school, and when the homeroom teacher questioned Lisa, she confessed. "Dorothy told me to say that," revealing the truth of the matter. Apparently, just as Betty was about to arrive at school, Lisa told her that, causing her to panic and start running home. So that's what happened. Even if it was done by a child, we can't overlook this. the governor said, glaring at Mark and Patricia. No, there must be some mistake. Mark made excuses. That's right. Maybe that Lisa girl is lying, Patricia chimed in. The governor looked at them with disdain as they made excuses, then said, Anyway. Why, yes? Mark straightened his back and responded. About Betty's mom, Nancy. Huh, did that pauper say something rude? What? You don't know her? If you'd been listening, you should realize that you two are the ones being rude. When the governor said that in exasperation. Huh? What do you mean? Mark replied, seeming not to understand. So the governor said irritably, That's not the point. Nancy is well known for being good at her job in this area, no, even outside the region. Yes, she's truly an ally to working women. And her contributions to disaster relief are amazing too. Mark and Patricia turned pale at their words. No, I still have a long way to go, I said. It was partly out of modesty, but I really do think I still have a lot to learn, so I felt overwhelmed being praised so much and answered that way. After becoming an independent heavy equipment operator, I took on 2 challenges while gaining on-site experience. One was starting a heavy equipment operator dispatch service so that women like me, with young children and unable to work as we'd like, could take on-site jobs even for short periods. The other was an activity during disasters called heavy equipment volunteering. Lately, I often hear about the 72-hour wall in disasters that once 3 days have passed since a disaster occurs, the survival rate drops drastically and rescue becomes a race against time. Now, small heavy equipment like shovel cars are gaining attention as a powerful ally in this. I learned about the existence of heavy equipment volunteers, who respond to requests and needs from disaster victims gathered at volunteer centers in affected areas to support those areas. As a heavy equipment operator myself, I couldn't sit still, wanting to help somehow, so I decided to participate in heavy equipment volunteering. I also asked professionals who could teach disaster area-specific heavy equipment techniques to hold workshops and such for dispatch members who wanted to go to affected areas like I did. I'm grateful that the things I took on were appreciated by many working women and people in disaster-stricken areas, and were even featured in local media at times. It's still fresh in my memory how I had the honor of having a discussion with the governor and mayor then. The governor added to the pale-faced Mark. Not just this incident with Betty, you'd better regret your own words and actions. Hearing those words from the governor, Mark and Patricia trembled. There have apparently been constant bad rumors about Mark's company lately. It seems the buildings and houses constructed by his company had many issues, and among the buildings damaged and collapsed in disasters, a high percentage were built by Mark's company. The state also grew suspicious that there was something behind this data and launched a large-scale investigation. It later came to light that Mark's company was colluding with the construction companies it ordered from, receiving donations and giving them priority orders, and effectively condoning the construction company's shoddy work on earthquake resistance, foundation work, material procurement, and so on. His company is being sued. As for the sudden cancellation of my work, my dad, who has worked at construction companies for many years and is well known in the industry, investigated and found that Mark and Patricia had a grudge over the children and pressured the construction companies through Mark's company not to place orders with my company. Mark's company apparently often demanded donations on the condition of placing orders, and interfered by not allowing companies to participate in bidding if they didn't comply. Companies and sole proprietors harmed by Mark's company, including myself, are coming together to sue for damages. Regarding the harassment of Betty and the pressure on the child who resigned as sub-drum major, many witnesses came forward. Even Dorothy couldn't make excuses anymore and could only hang her head, pale-faced. As a result, Dorothy could no longer stay at the school and had no choice but to move to an area where no one knew them. Recently, Betty has been saying that when she grows up, she wants to become a firefighter or police officer. I want to help lots of people like Mom does, and I want to make sure there are no bad people. I had always felt guilty for making Betty feel lonely since she was little, but children grow up watching their parents' backs. I realized it was really good that I worked hard wanting to show Betty my hardworking self. Remembering when Betty was small, my goal is to continue the current dispatch business that allows female heavy equipment operators to work even for short periods, so that women with children and women looking for ways to do what they can for others can be even a little more active. Eventually, I want to make it a company with a daycare. And for women who want to participate in small heavy equipment volunteering, I'm thinking of providing more and more places for education to improve their skills. From now on, for Betty's sake too, I want to keep moving forward true to my beliefs and shining bright. Hey, Mom, what's up with dinner? Finished cleaning yet? You better hurry up or Morgan will be back home. Kyle and Allison addressed me for the first time in months. In the cluttered living room, there I was, feeling under the weather. Something in me just snapped. Kyle and Allison, looking at my silence, laughed mockingly. I doubt I could ever forgive them, even if they apologized. To ensure they thoroughly reflected on their behavior, I decided to give them a taste of their own medicine, and then some. My name is Michelle, I'm 53. A housewife. I married Morgan, who is 5 years my senior, when I was 24. We had a daughter and a son. Our daughter Olivia is now 27. She married a guy she had been dating since high school and is now busy raising her kids. Our son Kyle is 25 and is set to get married next month. Both our children are starting their own happy lives, and I finally felt a sense of relief, like my parenting duties were truly winding down. But there's a bit of unease. It's about Kyle's fiancée, Allison. Allison and Kyle started dating about a year ago. But right after they began dating, Allison practically moved in with us. There was no formal introduction when we first met. Before I knew it, she was staying in Kyle's room, and naturally joined Kyle at the dining table, eating the meals I prepared. At first, thinking we might get along, I struck up a conversation with Allison during one of our meals. Allison, when do you have a day off? How about we cook together next time? At that point, I somehow sensed that Kyle would end up marrying Allison, so I asked. I thought building a comfortable relationship where she didn't feel obligated around us was best. But my concern seemed nothing but a nuisance to Allison. A day off to do chores? Me? Allison responded grumpily and fell silent. Mom, Allison isn't my wife yet. It's insane to make her do chores. Kyle also got angry and blamed me. I didn't mean it like that. I just thought it'd be nice to do something together. I'm sorry. Everyone wants to relax on their days off, right? I hastily apologized and chuckled, but Allison's sullen expression never cleared. But with the wedding set, Allison was becoming part of our family. It seemed there were disagreements between the two during wedding preparations, as I could hear them arguing from Kyle's room, but somehow they were making progress. Despite my expectations of them moving out after getting married, it seemed they intended to continue living with us, so not much would change. The wedding went off without any major issues. However, I learned then that Allison had quit her job. I thought it would have been nice to know that beforehand, as I kept smiling throughout the wedding. But on the flip side, maybe this meant she'd start pitching in with the household chores. After things settled post-wedding, I approached her about the household duties. Allison, I'd like you to start helping with the chores, just with what you can handle for now. It's also so you can quickly learn where everything is. It's for your own convenience too. But Allison didn't seem to change after the marriage. She just wore the same displeased expression in response to my words. Mom, you're rushing things. We're still newlyweds. Newlyweds, sure, but you've been living in this house for a year now. I'm not asking you to do everything all at once. You've quit your job, so I'd think you'd have some time for chores. Allison's sullen face and Kyle's reproachful words irked me, and I responded a bit sharply. Kyle is working too. But he hasn't contributed a single dollar to the household. And of course, that didn't change after Allison moved in. Kyle looked awkwardly at Allison in response to my words, but Allison just kept her face stern and glared at me. Well, you can start with vacuuming or cleaning the shower room. We're family now, so let's cooperate. That's what Michelle is saying. Morgan backed me up, speaking to Kyle and Allison. With Morgan's support, I thought things would start to improve, but I was perhaps too optimistic. The next day, Kyle and Allison began treating me as if I were invisible. As for Allison helping with the chores, not really. At most, she started putting away their laundry after I washed and cleaned it. Of course, Morgan was just as perplexed about it as I was. I can't understand what these fools are thinking. I'll talk to Kyle about it. And he did talk to Kyle. However, Allison doesn't want to talk to Michelle, was the reply I got, and it just added to my frustrations. Of course, during all this, Morgan had suggested they move out and try living on their own. But Kyle rejected this idea, saying it would be a waste of money. He doesn't seem to realize that living in your parents' home isn't meant to be free. Kyle and Allison continued their usual ways, never cleaning or tidying up. Kyle, please tidy up a bit. Allison, could you help with preparing the meal? Kyle, look at this video, it's hilarious. Even when I spoke, Allison wouldn't take her eyes off her mobile phone. Instead, she blatantly ignored me. But if I gave up now, it would be the end of us as a family. Morgan told me to just let it be, but I kept trying to communicate. However, 3 months of being ignored by Kyle and Allison took its toll, and the daily stress made me ill. I couldn't get up due to severe dizziness and a headache, and I couldn't do the cleaning or laundry. Just take it easy and rest. You need a break once in a while, Morgan said with a smile before leaving for work, and I decided to take his advice and rest. What the heck? No cleaning done? But I was awakened by Allison's loud voice. What? No breakfast either? Some housewife mom is. I get lectured, yet LOL, which mouth is she talking out of? It seemed Kyle and Allison had woken up. They spoke ill of me loudly enough for me to hear, laughing boisterously. Tears welled up in my eyes. I didn't want to cry out of frustration, but it seemed like I had been pushing myself too much. And then it was evening that day. After resting the whole day, I got a call from Morgan. Michelle, how are you feeling? Sorry, I said I'd bring dinner, but some urgent work came up, and I won't be home until after 8 p.m. Oh, is that so? Sorry for making you worry. I'm feeling a bit better, so it's okay. I'll try to get home as soon as I can. Just rest up, Morgan said and hung up the phone. He must have been in a hurry, taking the time to call amidst his busy schedule. I'm truly grateful that Morgan is always on my side. As Morgan suggested, I decided to rest up and wait for him to come home. I stepped out of the room a bit, and I was shocked when I passed through the living room. Candy wrappers and pizza boxes were scattered around, left as they were. Pajamas were thrown on the sofa, left where they were taken off, and there was no sign of vacuuming. Kyle was at work, so it must have been Allison's doing. Just then, Kyle came home. He sighed with a look of annoyance when he saw me. "You're back." I greeted him, but no response. Allison, sensing Kyle's return, came down from the upstairs. And just like Kyle, she sighed with annoyance upon seeing me. "Allison, please tidy up," I said, but of course, Allison ignored me as usual. Time passed, and the living room remained a mess. With a resigned look on my face, knowing that my words were futile, I stepped into the room. "Hey, Mom. What about dinner?" Kyle spoke to me for the first time in months. But of course, I didn't feel like responding. "Hey, ignoring me? That's pretty rude." Kyle snapped at my silence. Then, Allison looked at me and said, "Finished cleaning yet? You better hurry up or Morgan will be back." She said this, mocking me, laughing as she stood in the cluttered living room. What kind of people are they? They probably can't even imagine that I fell ill because of Kyle and Allison. Seeing me stunned, the two of them laughed, and I reached my breaking point. From that day on, I decided to completely ignore the two of them. I used to do their laundry and cook for them, but not anymore. I told Morgan about this decision along with the day's events last night. Morgan was frowning, arms crossed, but he said I could do as I pleased. So today, I prepared dinner just for Morgan and myself and set the table. "What do you mean there's no food for us? Is this some kind of harassment? That's really mean." Kyle was furious as soon as he saw the dining table. Allison seemed angry too. But I had no intention of responding. Coincidentally, it was Kyle's favorite gratin since childhood, but I doubt I'll ever make it for him again. Morgan didn't respond to Kyle or Allison's words either. Seeing our reaction, Kyle clicked his tongue and headed to the kitchen to search for food. That's when Morgan spoke up. "That instant ramen costs $3 a piece." Hearing that, Kyle looked up. "What?" he exclaimed. "What do you mean?" "It means exactly that. It's bought with my money, Michelle got it. If you're not going to do chores or contribute to living expenses, then pay for each item." I was surprised. Morgan is very kind. He's always been that way, both towards me and the kids. I appreciated him getting angry after yesterday's talk, but I didn't expect him to be this strict with Kyle. Using the shower is $5 per person, and sleeping here is $10 per night. If you want Michelle to cook for you, it's $8 per meal. I have more to say, but if you can't cooperate as a family, at least pay those amounts. Kyle clicked his tongue at Morgan's words and threw the instant ramen he was holding in frustration. Allison then spoke up. "Are you serious? Charging your own family money?" But Morgan calmly responded, "It's Kyle and Allison who've been exploiting the family without contributing. Michelle and I have said this countless times. We even suggested dissolving the cohabitation. If you still want to live here, then it's only fair to pay the equivalent value." Allison was speechless, probably unable to refute his logic. But she bit her lip. "Ah, you can use the kitchen and fridge. For now, you don't have to pay utilities. Just make sure you clean up after yourself. And buy your own groceries." Kyle was red with anger. But like Allison, he seemed unable to say anything in response. "This is ridiculous. I can't believe this. Are you kidding me?" They spewed childish insults and, stomping like children, returned to their room. Morgan and I exchanged glances and couldn't help but laugh. But their silence only lasted that day. The next day, they resumed using the shower and staying overnight as if nothing had changed. Allison showed no signs of cooking, and the frozen food and instant noodles I bought kept disappearing. Of course, they still hadn't paid a dime. I didn't want to talk to them anymore, so I said nothing about it. A few days later, Kyle and Allison were set to go on their honeymoon. I had intended to give them some money if we had a good relationship, but that was no longer the case. Don't expect any souvenirs. I wish we never have to come back. Their mood seemed lifted by the trip, and they even started complaining to Morgan. Well, you don't have to come back if you don't want to, I blurted out unintentionally. Hearing that, Allison glared at me with a sullen face. Despite their own words, I was amazed at their attitude as they left with their large suitcases. Once I confirmed they were away from the house, Morgan and I sprang into action. A moving company would arrive in a few hours. Yes, we decided to move out of the house while they were away. We had reached our limit of tolerance for living together. Despite our efforts, Kyle and Allison only depended on us and took advantage. We thought it better to just get rid of such a house. Kyle and Allison had been ignoring me all along. Morgan and I decided, ignoring them in return, that this was the best course of action. Our destination was Olivia's house. Olivia, aware of Kyle and Allison's terrible behavior and their treatment and insults towards me, had been inviting us over for a while. But it wasn't satisfying to just leave and let them take over the house. So we came up with a plan to sell the house and land while they were away. The new owner was already decided, and we had made the contract long ago. While our belongings were being moved out, a demolition company also arrived. Everything in Kyle's room was arranged to be disposed of. Important items and a few days' worth of clothes would be with them on their trip, so it wouldn't be a problem if they were gone. With the contracts signed and neighbors notified, we started the demolition as soon as the house was emptied. It was a house we lived in for a long time, but the feeling of liberation far outweighed any sentimentality. Michelle, shall we go? Let's go. Leaving the rest to the demolition crew, Morgan and I got into the car. Together with the moving company, we headed to Olivia's house. And a week later, the place where the house stood was already cleared and turned into an empty lot. And today was the day Kyle and Allison were returning from their trip. As expected, from the evening they arrived at what used to be their home, our phones started ringing. But neither Morgan nor I answered the phone. They must be panicking now that they've found the house gone. Soon enough, Olivia's phone also started ringing. Of course, it was Kyle. Olivia answered the phone with a smile. Yes? Olivia, it's terrible. The house is gone. Kyle's panicked voice from the get-go made me inadvertently laugh. Olivia, with a grin, responded to Kyle. The house is gone. What do you mean? Her exaggerated acting made me want to laugh even more. Anyway, there's nothing here. Dad and Mom are gone too. Then, from the other end of the line, Allison spoke. Olivia, you know something, don't you? Olivia responded irritably to that. Allison, even if I did know, why would I have any obligation to tell Kyle and you? I know how you've been troubling Dad and Mom. Wait, so Olivia, you were on their side? Kyle's words made Olivia laugh. Side? It's just the truth. Morgan intervened just as it seemed the phone call would turn into an argument. After switching the phone from Olivia, he began to speak. Anyway, the house is gone as you see. This means the cohabitation is over. Dad, how can you do this without consulting us? I'm your son. The house that Grandpa passed down should have been mine to inherit. This is outrageous. I was flabbergasted by Kyle's words. Morgan, sitting beside me, started to laugh heartily. What is Kyle talking about? That house and land are in Michelle's name. There's nothing I inherited from Dad to pass on. There's nothing to give to Kyle. What do you mean? That house, Mom's property? I've never heard of that. Kyle was freaking out on the other end of the phone. He apparently didn't know. That land was bought with the money I saved and invested before I got married. Morgan and I lived in an apartment for a while after getting married, but the investments went well, and the money kept growing. So, before the kids started elementary school, we bought that land and house. Although they are now in a facility, we had even called the in-laws' house to live together when the kids were young. Kyle, having lived in that house since he was little, must have mistakenly thought it was originally owned by Morgan's dad. Of course, we never hid the fact that the house was in my name. Only Olivia knew about it. Kyle and Allison should reflect on the current situation as a result of their presumptions, lack of effort, and not valuing me. Raising your voice will only disturb the neighbors, so find a hotel or sleep outside today, whatever you prefer. Wait, Dad! Ignoring Kyle's words, Morgan hung up the phone. Haha, it's their own fault, isn't it? Olivia was laughing so hard, clutching her stomach. I, too, couldn't help but smile at the thought of the two of them in despair. The next morning, early on, Olivia's house doorbell rang. Predictably, it was Kyle and Allison. Should I handle this? Olivia's husband offered, but Morgan and I shook our heads. We can't impose on you any further. We'll handle it, it's fine. Morgan and I stood at the front door. To avoid disturbing the neighbors, we decided to speak at the entrance. As I unlocked the doorknob turned with incredible force. I braced myself, thinking Kyle would lash out, but Morgan shielded me. Contrary to our expectations, as soon as Kyle burst in, he immediately began apologizing deeply. Dad, Mom, I'm truly sorry. We were wrong. Next to him, Allison, also in tears, sobbed. We never realized how upset Morgan and Michelle were. We meant it as a joke, but we hurt you, and we're truly sorry. Their words only infuriated me more. A joke? You freeloaded for a year and then ignored me for 3 months. You think you can pass that off as a joke? We're apologizing, aren't we? An apology doesn't fix anything. I've warned you both repeatedly. You never listened to any of those warnings. Morgan's shout made Kyle and Allison freeze. Let me make one thing clear. The money I've spent so far has gone to living expenses and tuition. Now, all the property and savings are in Michelle's name. Everything that Kyle and Allison have ignored and made Michelle suffer for is Michelle's. Don't even think about inheriting anything. Kyle and Allison turned pale and started trembling at those words. I had never seen Morgan display such anger. Feeling blessed to have Morgan, who was so fiercely protective, I simultaneously wondered how we ended up raising such a monster like Kyle. I pondered if our parenting was flawed, even though I had thought I gave both Olivia and Kyle the same love and care. It made me think that perhaps there is an inherent nature in people. Kyle and Allison, ejected from Olivia's house, left without the initial vigor, dragging their large suitcases behind them. Apparently, they had splurged on their honeymoon and had no money left even to rent an apartment. They were distributing honeymoon souvenirs while asking friends for money, which I found utterly exasperating. What a miserable couple they were. Kyle and Allison, having lost their home, money, and parents. For now, they seemed to be staying in an internet cafe, but apparently, they once couldn't pay the fee and called Olivia. It's none of my business. Why don't you sell your rings and make some money yourselves? Olivia said this to me, laughing as she recounted pushing them away. I didn't know this, but apparently, Kyle and Allison's wedding rings were from a high-end brand, embedded with diamonds. They could surely pay the rent for an apartment if they sold those, but I can't understand their mentality of begging others without sacrificing anything they own. Olivia said. I certainly agree with that. After that, the calls ceased. They probably did as Olivia suggested, selling rings or bags to get a house. They need to learn the hard work of paying for utilities and doing household chores themselves. Morgan and I continue to live happily at Olivia's house. Morgan seems to enjoy drinking with Olivia's husband, and I thoroughly enjoy my new life playing with grandchildren, having lunch with Olivia, and more. To not trouble Olivia with inheritance issues, I've been paying for living expenses, and we plan to go on many family vacations. Though Morgan and I are still young, we want to spend our twilight years using up our money, leaving behind plenty of joyful memories, ready for our departure to heaven. Ah, feels so refreshing. Revived. Ensley, my sister-in-law, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, came over to our place and sprawled out on the air-conditioned living room sofa, as usual. My daughter Miranda, who was doing her homework, frowned in annoyance. Let's see, haven't finished your summer project yet, have you? Ensley peered over at the summer plan. I remember those days. With summer projects, you never really know what to do, right? In that regard, Miranda, I'm kinda envious of you. What do you mean? Miranda asked, puzzled. Well, not many kids are born with such an interesting face like you. How about you compile something about that challenge of yours? LOL. It'd be easy, right? Miranda was born with a rare condition called cleft lip and palate, which resulted in splits in her upper lip and palate. She had undergone numerous surgeries over the years, but more than anything, it was the stares from others that hurt her the most. The condition made her face asymmetrical from her mouth to her nose, and the ignorant stares were painfully sharp. Why am I the only one like this? Miranda had tearfully asked before. I couldn't stay silent at Ensley's incredibly insensitive remark. Ensley. Even if we're family, there are things you should and shouldn't say. I was just stating the facts. If she compiles something about her interesting condition, everyone will be pleased, won't they? Ensley is laughing, saying Miranda's condition is interesting. Without knowing how much pain and struggle Miranda and we have gone through. Don't worry about what she says, Miranda. I grabbed Ensley's arm, ready to forcefully drag her out of the house. That's when Miranda stood up slowly, smiling, and said, Don't worry, Mom, I've decided. My name is Eleanor. I live with my elementary school-aged daughter Miranda. My husband Dennis is a good husband and father, but he's away on work assignment. I'm home, Mom. I'll go wash my hands, then I'll help with chopping the vegetables. Saying this, Miranda took off her mask. Nowadays, everyone wears masks when going out due to the pandemic. But Miranda has been wearing a mask in front of anyone other than family since she was young. She must still feel resistance to showing her bare face. Miranda was born with a condition called cleft lip and palate, which is not commonly known. It's a congenital condition where the upper lip and palate are split, occurring in about 1 in 1,000 births in the United States. Seeing our child for the first time, my husband and I were shocked but also vowed to protect her no matter what. Cleft lip and palate requires several surgeries, and Miranda's first surgery was just 2 months after she was born. Though the surgery closed her mouth, it didn't completely correct the distortion in her mouth and nose. Most people don't know much about this condition, which made me worried about how Miranda would be perceived as she grew up. There would surely be times when Miranda would get hurt. Still, Dennis and I discussed letting Miranda live like any other child, attending school and going to amusement parks just like her peers. The days of hospital visits must have been painful for young Mirinda, who usually doesn't complain much. Mirinda would become anxious before surgery, saying, "Mom." There must have been unspeakable anxiety clinging to her. She wouldn't let go of my hand until she fell asleep. As an elementary student, Mirinda would come home and share various school events with laughter. "Today, Gerald and my class mimicked the teacher, and it was so funny. During lunch, we played rock, paper, scissors to see who gets the dessert of the kid who was absent, and Caitlin won. Over the last long weekend, Tyrone from the next class went on a vacation with his family. But their dad got lost while driving, and it was a huge mess." Mirinda would tell fun stories at dinner every day, but I noticed something off. None of the stories Mirinda told included herself. Mirinda always just tells me about things others have said or done. She never mentions doing anything with a friend herself. Despite a bad feeling, I lacked the courage to directly ask her about it. One day in second grade, Mirinda came home crying. "What's wrong? What happened?" Seeing Mirinda cry, except before surgeries, surprised me. Mirinda was silent, looking frustrated, but then she couldn't hold back anymore and started crying louder. "It's okay, you can cry all you want." I hugged my daughter tightly. After calming down, Mirinda said, "You know, Mom," and shared feelings she had kept to herself. Even though Mirinda wears a mask to school to hide her mouth and nose's distortions, she has to remove it during lunchtime. The first time they ate together, a boy sitting across from her pointed and laughed, saying, "Your face looks weird." That started it, and other kids gathered around, saying, "Really? That's funny," expressing their thoughts aloud. The teacher quickly scolded everyone, "Back to your seats," settling the situation. But from that day, Mirinda felt ostracized, unable to join any friend's circle. She had been enduring this for over a year. "Why did you keep silent until now?" "Because, Mom and Dad, you always have it tough because of my condition, right? Surgeries cost a lot of money, and you have to go back and forth between the hospital and home for me. Mirinda, for US." Knowing Mirinda was considerate of us made me feel inadequate as a parent. Why am I the only one like this? Tears fell again from Mirinda's eyes after she finished speaking. "I'm sorry, Mirinda. Despite being blameless, she's had a hard time at school. Not just school. Mirinda might continue to be seen strangely by others because of her condition. I blamed myself, feeling responsible for her suffering. I'm sorry, Mirinda. From now on, Mom promises to be by your side as much as possible to protect you. Even for busy Dad at work, I'll be with you." I hugged Mirinda again tightly. When I told Dennis after he came home, "It's hard not being there when you're going through tough times. I've let you handle all the hardship alone," Dennis also blamed himself. "It can't be helped. I'll protect Mirinda's heart, and you protect our livelihood. Let's protect Mirinda together." Yes, we should. We vowed again to protect our daughter. From that day, I quit my job at the apparel company and became a housewife. In third grade, Mirinda underwent her fourth surgery. While the first 3 surgeries were minor corrections, the fourth involved transplanting bone from her pelvis to her upper jaw. It was more extensive than before, but it made the distortion from her mouth to her nose less noticeable, making her look no different from other children. However, having bone removed from her pelvis made walking difficult for Mirinda, forcing her into a wheelchair for a while. Still, Mirinda would look at her face in the hand mirror and ask with a bright, radiant smile never seen before, "Hey, Mom. Do I look prettier now?" Seeing my daughter happy and smiling without feeling self-conscious made me happy too. "Yes, you're very pretty, Mirinda." I brushed her hair and spoke to her. After a while, Mirinda began serious walking rehabilitation. She almost fell during the unfamiliar rehab, but when I tried to help, "Just watch, Mom," she scolded me. Holding onto the handrail, Mirinda grimaced with each step, "This is nothing. My face looks proper pretty now. Lucky, right, never showing any signs of weakness." "Does it hurt? Are you okay?" I couldn't help but worry and wanted to support her physically. "If you always support me, Mom, there's no point in rehab." Mirinda laughed shyly. As a result of her positive attitude towards rehab, the pain in her hips completely vanished. And she could walk on her own without needing crutches anymore. 2 years later, Mirinda was in 5th grade. There were still scars on her lips, but they were hardly noticeable and less mentioned. It seems Mirinda has grown to like looking at her face in the mirror. Upon waking up, she heads straight to the bathroom and faces herself in the mirror with a smile. She used to dislike even approaching a mirror. The memory of those times feels like a distant past, making me chuckle to myself. "I wish I could see Dad," Mirinda sighed. Dennis has been on a work assignment far away. We sometimes communicate via video calls, but it's not the same as having him nearby. Sherry said her family is going on an overseas trip. Frederick is going camping. Everyone seems so lucky. Despite it being summer vacation, Mirinda lamented not being able to go anywhere due to our circumstances. One day, while we were spending a holiday at home, the doorbell suddenly rang. "I'll get it." Mirinda stopped her summer homework in the living room and headed to the entrance, as I was busy with household chores and couldn't leave them. "What, Aunt again? You came back?" I could hear Mirinda's displeased voice. "How rude. You came back? I'm your aunt, after all. Family can visit as many times as they want, right?" Saying so, the visitor entered the house without waiting for Mirinda's consent. "Ah, it's cool here. Revived." I poked my head out from the balcony and welcomed the guest half-heartedly. "Welcome, Ensley." The guest was Ensley, Dennis's sister. According to Dennis, after graduating from high school, Ensley worked as an office clerk at a small trading company but ended up quitting within 3 months after being reprimanded by a senior for taking too many days off and getting into a heated argument. Now, she's living back at home. Dad told me she doesn't even bother to look at job ads he shows her. Just throws them on the floor and spends all day playing video games. Dennis complained about Ensley's lack of motivation. Ensley just sat down on the sofa as if it were the most natural thing in the world. As Mirinda tried to return to her homework, Ensley, fanning her sweaty shirt front to catch some air, exclaimed, "It's so hot. This weather is absolutely crazy." Ensley loudly exclaimed, disregarding Mirinda, who was trying to study. When Mirinda frowned in annoyance, Ensley did not miss it. "Am I bothering you, niece?" she asked with a creepy smile, intentionally disturbing Mirinda. Mirinda just sighed without engaging, knowing from experience that arguing would only encourage Ensley to be more annoying. "Mirinda, I'd like something cold. Auntie's thirsty," Ensley said in a cloying voice and hugged Mirinda. "Please stay away, it's hot." Mirinda pushed Ensley away with a calm voice as she tried to lean on her, and Ensley clicked her tongue. "What's with you? No charm at all. Eleanor, don't you have something to drink?" I took out coffee from the fridge, poured it into a cup, and handed it to Ensley. "Could you keep it down a bit? Mirinda is studying," I admonished Ensley in a low voice, though I knew it was futile. "You know, I always wonder." Ensley looked around the room and poked Mirinda's cheek with her finger, asking, "Why doesn't Mirinda study in her own room?" Seeing Mirinda swat her hand away, Ensley laughed as if amused. To save on electricity. Mirinda answered irritably. Saving on electricity. So that's why you're scrimping? Mom isn't working, right? That's why you guys are poor. Mirinda slammed her hand on the table in frustration. Don't compare me to someone who doesn't work despite being old enough. Are you talking about me? Wow, Mirinda, that's harsh. Your mom doesn't work outside either. Always lazing around at home just like me, right? That's not true. Mom is busy being a housewife. She's always cooking, cleaning, doing laundry. There's a lot to do. She's not lazy like Aunt. Mirinda retorted with a firm stance. Really? Even Mirinda is being cold to me? Listen, my parents are like, if you want to use the air conditioner so much, pay the high electricity bill yourself. Can you believe that? Living with family and they say that? It's your own fault for not working and just lazing around and playing in your room all the time. Well, it's not like I can pay for that. Going to cafes costs money, department stores are far and a hassle. So in the end, the only place I can rely on is Mirinda's house. Despite Mirinda's reluctance, Ensley hugged her again. This is how Ensley would come over unannounced, trampling over our lives every time. Even though she's Dennis's sister, I couldn't bring myself to forcefully kick her out. When I consult Dennis, who's away on his own, he says, kick her out immediately. If it comes to it, calling the police is fine. But she's still family, and I couldn't bring myself to do that. Taking advantage of my inability to stand firm, Ensley has been getting increasingly bold lately. Anyway, Eleanor, you've got it easy, right? Because you can just play around at home every day. I'm not taking it easy at all. I snapped back at Ensley, irritated. After engaging more than I should have, I calmed down and realized I shouldn't have. Predictably, Ensley got even more encouraged. It's fine to slack off, right? Just buy whatever you like from the grocery store for meals, and for cleaning, just quickly tidy up the places that catch the eye. That's what I would do, LOL. She suggested I take shortcuts in my role as a housewife. Don't compare me with Aunt. Besides, it's annoying because of her I can't concentrate on my studies. Can you just go home? Mirinda protested strongly. Oh, scary. Ensley exaggeratedly shivered. So, Mirinda, what have you been studying? Should I help you? I might be able to teach you addition or subtraction. I've already learned that, thank you. Please, just go home. Oh. What's this? Your summer project isn't finished yet. Ensley peered over at Mirinda's planner. I remember those days. With summer projects, you never really know what to do, right? It's hard to find something you actually want to research. In that regard, Mirinda, I'm kinda envious. What do you mean? Well, not many kids are born with such an interesting face like you. Why don't you compile something about that condition? It'd be easy, right? LOL. It's about yourself, so you wouldn't have to research much. I couldn't stay silent at my sister-in-law's incredibly insensitive remark. Enough, Ensley. There are things you should and shouldn't say, even if we're family. Oh, scary, scary. I was just stating the facts. If she compiles something about her interesting condition, everyone will be pleased, won't they? Ensley is calling Mirinda's condition interesting. Laughing, without knowing how much pain and suffering Mirinda and we have gone through. Mirinda, don't worry about what such a person says. I grabbed Ensley's arm, trying to drag her out of the house with all my might. That's when Mirinda stood up slowly and said with a smile, Don't worry, Mom. I've decided. In contrast to me, who was about to explode with anger, Mirinda was completely calm. Well then, Mirinda, I don't quite understand, but your mom seems really angry, so I'll leave, Ensley said without a shred of remorse, smirking creepily as she prepared to leave. I wanted to unleash my anger on her, but Mirinda pulled at the hem of my shirt, stopping me. You too, Mom, shouldn't worry about what that person says. Looking at the suddenly quiet entrance after Ensley left, Mirinda spoke. She must have some plan in mind. Thinking this, I managed to suppress my anger. 3 months passed. Mirinda, it's okay to relax a bit. Saying that, the national newspaper reporter eased the slightly tense expression on Mirinda's face. Dressed in new clothes bought for this day, Mirinda smiled with confidence. That's the spirit. You're doing great. Praised by the handsome reporter, Mirinda's cheeks flushed slightly. 3 months ago, I couldn't have imagined Mirinda being interviewed by a national newspaper. The interview took place in a small cafe in the neighborhood, which we had reserved. The owner, who I've known for a long time, whispered to me, "Hasn't Mirinda become quite beautiful?" Indeed, the last time the owner saw Mirinda was before her 4th surgery. As Mirinda's mother, always watching her closely, it was hard for me to notice. But acquaintances who saw her without a mask after a long time were often surprised. Mirinda's treatment had progressed so much that her facial structure from her mouth to her nose was indistinguishable from other children's. Of course, some surgery scars remained, but they were hardly noticeable unless pointed out. Let's take one last photo. Smile. Prompted by the reporter, Mirinda smiled broadly without her mask. 3 months ago, on the night Ensley left, Mirinda declared to me, "I've decided on my summer project theme. I want everyone to know about me. I'll do what Aunt suggested." She didn't seem bothered by Ensley's words. In fact, she seemed more radiant than before. "Is that okay with you, Mirinda?" I asked. Laughing a little, Mirinda said, "Mom, you're always overprotective. I'm not the crybaby I used to be. This is something I've decided to do myself." Seeing my daughter so full of confidence, I felt reassured. "All right, then I won't stop you. Go ahead as you think is best, Mirinda." "Okay, got it." From that day, Mirinda began to confront her condition of cleft lip and palate again. Shortly after starting elementary school, she had been teased by classmates about the shape of her nose and mouth. Suffering in silence because she couldn't tell her parents. She compiled the numerous surgeries she underwent and the teasing into a booklet, including photos from those times. There's one photo that is particularly meaningful to me. It was taken the day Mirinda first opened up to us about the mean things said at school. Although she protested, "No, don't take a picture," I took it anyway. "Why did you take a photo?" She protested tearfully, but I hugged her tightly. "Someday, we'll look back at this day and laugh, Mirinda." At the time, Mirinda couldn't understand and just cried out of frustration. Afterward, we discussed why people hold such prejudices. We concluded that prejudice stems from ignorance. Indeed, cleft lip and palate is a rare condition, affecting 1 in 1,000 people. But with ongoing treatment, one's appearance can become indistinguishable from others. We hoped that more people knowing about the condition and its treatment would reduce the instances of patients being viewed strangely. That became our family's unified wish. In advancing her summer project, Mirinda set up a special website and conducted a survey for children suffering from the same condition and their parents. This revealed that other families, like ours, were troubled and pained by prejudice. Good luck, Mirinda. You're very brave. If there's anything we can do, just let us know. I realized Mirinda had many supportive comrades suffering from the same condition. Mom, thank you for giving birth to me. Thank you for raising me. Because you supported me, I was able to get this far. Miranda whispered, looking at the photo. The hard worker is you, I replied. Miranda had undergone numerous surgeries since she was very young. Especially the fourth surgery, which involved transplanting bone from her pelvis to her upper jaw, was the most challenging, leaving her unable to walk on her own for a while, but she never complained. She is truly a strong child. Of course, I feel like hiding my face with a mask. But I've come to think that this unique aspect of mine could be considered cool. Miranda said confidently. A month after summer vacation ended, Miranda came home from school and said, "Look. My summer project was highly praised at school, and I was awarded this certificate." She showed me the certificate, breathless and sweaty from her excitement. My friend said I was cool. Miranda happily shared her school experiences. A month after that, a newspaper company contacted us for an interview. I read the interview article. Miranda, you're amazing. Miranda's article was published in a national newspaper, catching the eye of Dennis, who was on a work assignment. He immediately video called us. If you were going to be published, you could have told me. I was just reading the newspaper when suddenly I see Miranda's face all over it. And I spit out the coffee I was drinking from surprise. It wouldn't have been fun if I told you beforehand. I wanted to see your reaction without saying anything first. So, I fell for the surprise, huh? Dennis laughed heartily over the video call. Miranda peeked out and said, "Are you happy to see your daughter's face after so long, Dad?" Well, yes. But, you really gathered courage to compile something about your condition, didn't you? Then, Miranda's smile faded, and she answered seriously. I presented it because I wanted to reduce the number of people who, like Aunt, say hurtful things out of ignorance about diseases and disabilities. Ensley? Did she say something to you? We revealed the hurtful things Ensley had said to Miranda during her summer visit. That girl. Dennis sighed. I'll give her a piece of my mind. The next day, we received a call from Mael. I read Miranda's article. It's amazing, Miranda. But I heard Ensley said terrible things. Dennis called me yesterday, and I was shocked. Luke is furious. He's been saying he won't forgive Ensley since yesterday. I'm worried his blood pressure might go up. But Ensley really is trouble. Mael said, promising to make Ensley apologize soon. A few days later, Ensley came to visit as promised. Are you there? If you are, come out already. She banged on the door so hard I worried it might break, not seeming like she came to apologize, but rather irritated. When I went to answer, there stood Ensley, looking devilish. What are you doing on your own? She protested, not apologizing but complaining instead. I had no idea why Ensley was so angry. When I remained silent, thanks to your daughter stirring things up, I got yelled at by my parents and bro. Now I feel uncomfortable at home. How are you going to take responsibility? She demanded. Apparently, Ensley had been severely scolded by my in-laws and Dennis because of Miranda's project. But I thought it was all Ensley's fault. Unable to hold back my anger at Ensley's lack of remorse, I exploded. Enough, Ensley. If you're not here to apologize, please leave. I finally let out the anger I had been holding back, even to Ensley, who kept repeating her arrogant attitude. For the first time, I openly protested, leaving Ensley momentarily taken aback. Whether you're my husband's sister or whoever, anyone who hurts my precious daughter is not family. Don't come to our house again. You're nothing but trouble. What? Getting angry all of a sudden? Silly. Even though I came to apologize, you're kicking me out. Fine then. I'll tell the family you're a stubborn DIL. Just remember that. Miranda interjected while listening beside me. Aunt. I'm recording our conversation, so lying is useless. It'll be found out soon anyway, she said, admonishing Ensley like a child who won't listen. Oh well. I guess I'll forgive you just for today then. With those final words, Ensley left with a pale face. Ah, that feels so much better. Now in 5th grade, Miranda seems more mature than ever to me. She never used to complain, not because she didn't want to but because she didn't want to worry us. But now, it's different. Miranda isn't holding back tears anymore. She doesn't even feel the need to cry because she's become so strong and resilient. Looking at Miranda's serene profile, I couldn't help but feel a bit reflective. Maybe I've been too worried about her. With the sole intention of not letting her feel lonely, I quit my job to always be there for her. But it seems Miranda is fine now. Without me realizing, she has grown up and surrounded herself with many strong allies. Lately, she's been bringing school friends home more frequently. What, is there something on my face? Miranda noticed my gaze and looked at me questioningly. Yes, lots of happiness. What? That makes no sense. Laughing at my response, Miranda seemed amused. Feeling her growth, I decided to rejoin the workforce at an apparel company I had been invited to rejoin. Eleanor, I read the newspaper. Miranda did great, didn't she? Every time my coworkers mentioned it, I calmly responded, she probably doesn't think she did anything extraordinary. She just presented her life as it is. One evening, Miranda shared her future dreams with me. I want to become a doctor. To help children and families suffering from diseases and disabilities like mine. Facing myself through my summer project made me think that. And I've been thinking lately, there are people who can't run fast, those who struggle with studies. Tall people, short people. My condition is just another trait among those. Hearing her aspirations, I felt hopeful for her future. Oh, and by the way, a boy in my class told me he likes me. Miranda casually mentioned her dream and then shared this news. Reporting this to Dennis via video call, he panicked. What? Isn't it too early for her to be in a relationship? Hey, are you okay with this? Calm down, my dear husband. I calmed down the frantically panicking Dennis. The fact that a boy confessed to Miranda probably means that the kids around her have stopped caring about her condition. As for Ensley, I heard she was kicked out by Dennis and the in-laws. Ensley, who had been lazing around at home every day without working part-time, finally decided to become independent after losing financial support. In reality, she had no choice but to do so. Now, she struggles with living alone in a small, old apartment, earning a little from part-time work. The wish Miranda had for her summer project, to reduce ignorant and hurtful comments about diseases and disabilities, is also my wish. Of course, 1 or 2 actions alone won't change the world. But that's exactly why we, who know the struggles and pain, must continue to spread the truth to the world. I vowed in my heart to continue watching over Miranda, ensuring her growth isn't hindered. Dennis has decided to return from his assignment. Dennis convinced his boss to allow him to work predominantly remotely. I won't let you two feel lonely again, he said. But then, you came back because you're worried Miranda might get a boyfriend, aren't you? That's not the case, Dennis awkwardly responded. Anyway, we're back to living happily and closely as a family of 3. A family that's always full of laughter, our pride and joy. My name is Luna. I was a 28-year-old who worked in a flower shop located in an office building, creating flower arrangements. My husband, Oliver, was 30, 2 years older than me, and worked as a hairstylist in the same building on the second floor. He was not exactly a celebrity stylist, but he was quite popular. We were celebrating our 3rd year of marriage that year. Apart from the fact that we had been unable to have children, I thought we were doing well as a happy couple. But it seemed I was the only one who thought that way. How did we first meet? Oliver used to frequently buy flowers for his salon from the flower shop on the 1st floor. Initially wary of Oliver, who was skilled in conversation due to his job, I gradually found it natural to have him by my side. How long was it after we started dating? Oliver invited me to dinner at his parents' house, saying he wanted to introduce me to his family. There, Oliver's brother and his fiancée were also present. I had heard about Oliver's struggles being compared to his excellent younger brother, but his brother was unpretentious and amiable, easy to talk to. Handsome, good-natured, and dependable, his brother had it all. Can't blame the parents for comparing, really. His fiancée, too, was beautiful and seemed quite talented. A stunningly attractive couple. Sitting opposite them, I couldn't help but wonder if I would be compared to his brother's bride-to-be if I married Oliver. During the lively conversation over dinner, "Have you guys decided on a date for the wedding ceremony?" Oliver asked his brother. Then, "We're about to decide. We'd love some suggestions for good venues." The brother and his fiancée replied. Oliver's brother, a promising banker, and his fiancée, working at a securities firm, were both solid professionals. Thinking they would prefer something luxurious, considering they'd invite bosses and work colleagues, I suggested some famous venues where my corporate friends had their weddings. The fiancée searched the venues on her mobile phone, happily engrossed in a page showing a venue with a garden chapel. Then Oliver chimed in. "Hey, why don't we do the wedding ceremony together? How about a restaurant wedding?" And so he had proposed with a casual tone. It was something I had hoped would happen eventually, but I was shocked by his sudden suggestion, especially since he hadn't yet formally met my parents. Then, from somewhere, I heard a distinct sking noise. I couldn't believe it, but it seemed like the sound came from my BIL's fiancée. She was making an incredibly dissatisfied face and muttering under her breath. BIL's girlfriend might be okay with such a ceremony, but I. Then Lucas, Oliver's brother, exclaimed, "Bro, that's a great idea! These kinds of stylish ceremonies are becoming more popular." He seemed genuinely excited about Oliver's suggestion. Being more displeased, the fiancée glared at me more, as if to stop Oliver from saying whatever he wanted. But she was glaring at the wrong person. If she had a problem, I wished she would speak up to the enthusiastic brothers instead. Subsequently, driven by the brothers' excitement, we ended up planning a restaurant wedding, and everything progressed quickly. In a flurry, we managed to greet my parents, and the 4 of us dined out to choose a venue. As days passed, the once disgruntled fiancée warmed up to Oliver, who was now BIL, and they got along so well that one would think they were the couple getting married. However, her attitude towards me remained unchanged. And so, 6 months later, the 2 couples held their restaurant weddings. After the marriage, I switched from full-time to part-time at work, focusing more on household chores. I left for work after sending Oliver off, returned home earlier to prepare dinner, and waited for Oliver's return. This became my routine. Sometimes, my BIL and his wife, both working full-time, relied on our dinner unexpectedly. It seemed cooking was too much of a hassle for them. Camila, my CL, came with just a token gift, evidently expecting me to cook, sparing herself the effort. At the dinner table, Camila oddly sat next to Oliver instead of her husband, treating me more like a convenient housekeeper. Honestly, their visits were far from welcome. Moreover, she indirectly criticized me, saying I looked plain or that my only talent was messing with flowers. I couldn't stand being demeaned in front of Oliver, but I hated confrontations, so I pretended not to mind Camila's words. Instead, after they left, "Why does she look down on people so much? It's terrible to imply someone's worthless if they don't work at an office." I vented to Oliver. "She's a competent and successful woman. Maybe you're just hearing it that way, Luna." It sounds like you're envious. You shouldn't say things like that. But his response was always defensive of Camila. Oliver, proud of his brother's achievements, seemed unwilling to hear anything negative about his brother's wife. It felt like he was implying I was the problem, listing all of Camila's virtues instead. Recently, my daily life had changed a bit due to Lucas's sudden solo assignment. Camila, too, seems somewhat reluctant to come uninvited to our dinners alone. With fewer visits from her, I was free from her snide comments and had been able to spend my days more peacefully. But now, a different worry had surfaced. For some reason, Oliver had been coming home late at night, day after day, leaving me to have dinner and go to bed alone. It was really worrying that he had been returning home after midnight so frequently. I hoped he didn't fall ill. One morning, as Oliver hurriedly got ready for work. "You've been coming home late recently. Are you okay? I'm worried you might wear yourself out." I asked him. Oliver didn't even look at me. No need to worry. It's just a contest. I'm busy preparing for a hair contest." He stammered. I haven't heard anything about a hair contest. Usually, he'd make a big deal about entering a hair contest weeks in advance, but this time, nothing. Isn't that strange? Sensing his haste, I asked, "When is this contest? You didn't mention it before. Did you decide to enter suddenly?" Without turning face to me, he replied, "Yeah, that's right. I overlooked the invitation. I've been busy arranging for a cut model and stuff." He didn't even look at me. Come to think of it, when a contest was near, a really cute cut model used to come to the salon after hours. Is she coming this time too? Is it the same cut model you usually have? I asked nonchalantly. Oliver exaggeratedly replied, "Yeah, that's right. I've been keeping her late. Really, I feel so bad about it." His manner of speaking seemed exaggerated. What is this? This feels so forced. Doesn't his speech sound unnatural? Despite my feelings. Is that really okay? It's dangerous to keep a girl late every day, even if you're short on time. When I looked at Oliver, he seemed determined to avoid eye contact. Glancing at his watch, he said, Look at the time. I'm going to be late." Ignoring my words, he hurried out the door. Did he just run away? That reaction was so unnatural. Am I overthinking this? Could it be something with the cut model, an affair? No, that can't be it. The more I thought about it, the worse my thoughts got. After all, such things are unthinkable, aren't they? It's just my bad habit of overthinking. I need to stop that. It's just the late nights because of the hair contest preparations, that's all. Carrying these troubled thoughts, I got ready and headed to work. When I arrived at the shop, Mason, the manager of the salon where Oliver worked, was there picking out flowers for the salon. It was usually Oliver who picked the flowers, so it was unusual to see Mason here. Mason said he leaves the flower selection to Oliver because he doesn't know much about them. Could it be that Oliver asked Mason to pick the flowers to avoid further questions about this morning's conversation? I decided to probe a little. "Oliver is participating in a hair contest with you, right? Good luck with that," I said to Mason. But Mason looked confused. "Which hair contest? We don't have any such plans," he asked. I also asked about the cut model, but he said they hadn't requested any recently. Apparently, the model was Mason's cousin, who was currently studying abroad. As for the late nights, Mason said that Oliver had been leaving the salon at the regular closing time, so there was no way he had to come home after midnight. It seemed like everything Oliver told me was a lie. So, what had Oliver been doing every night, and with whom? While my suspicion about the cut model was cleared, I still felt uneasy. Stunned and trying to grasp the situation. Should I subtly ask him about it? Mason offered. I thought about accepting Mason's offer, but would Oliver give him a straight answer? I felt like Oliver, being so good at talking, would give vague responses. It seemed more likely that something was going on. I didn't want to give Oliver any chance to concoct an excuse. I had to keep it a secret that I was aware of his lies and probing into the matter. I told Mason that I would handle it myself for now, and asked him to keep our conversation secret, saying I would seek his advice if needed. That night, I decided to wait for Oliver and ask him as if I was oblivious to everything. I doubted he would tell me the truth anyway. Around midnight, Oliver finally came home. While claiming to have been working late, he looked slightly startled when he saw me waiting up. "I'm home. I'm exhausted. Finally got the new haircut done," he said, unaware that I knew everything. I wondered what kind of amazing haircut he completed. I asked Oliver, who was trying to mask his nervousness. "You must be worn out. Hey, do you mind if I ask something?" As I spoke quietly. "What's up? What do you want to know?" His voice trembled. "Are you really working? Are you really preparing for a hair contest?" Oliver replied. "Well, of course I am. What else would it be?" His unease was apparent. He seemed intent on sticking to his lies. "In that case." "Oh? What about cheating? Yes or no?" I asked directly, and his face changed completely. "What? Of course I'm not." Oliver began to get defensive. Even the usually eloquent Oliver had no room for jokes. Despite his panic, he tried to weave an escape with desperate excuses. "You know, Mason told me. The hair contest is a lie, right? Wouldn't it be better to just come clean? What are you really doing?" I cornered him with no escape. Apparently, he had no excuses left and, trembling with clenched fists, "Fine. I'll say it. It's an affair. I've fallen in love with someone else," he blurted out. His confession came off as resigned and frustrated. He even started to get angry, as if it was some sort of injustice. I tried to get him to confess who the other person was, but he refused to say, probably because it was someone he shouldn't be involved with. No matter how much I pressed, my anger only grew. "Then I'll hire a detective or whatever it takes to find out. Just be ready." "It's Camila." Hearing my words, he went pale and confessed in a defeated tone. "Camila? Isn't she Lucas's wife?" I was shocked, and he retorted. "Yes, Camila. She's pregnant with my child." "You haven't had a child with me, but you did with someone else, and that someone is your brother's wife? That's despicable." As I hurled accusations at Oliver, he retorted with unreasonable words. "It's your fault for being infertile. Anyway, I'm going to take responsibility and divorce you." His words were infuriatingly unfair. That explained why he always sided with his Sael over me. "Are you kidding? Do you even realize what you're saying? Does Lucas know?" To have been treated this way by him, I couldn't help but be angry. "It doesn't matter. Camila and I won't be separated. She's going to divorce Lucas and be with me. No one can stop us," Oliver declared defiantly. "If you don't like it, then let's get a divorce right now." Disgusted by his words, I retorted. "Don't like it? That's an understatement. I'll gladly divorce you." I decided then and there to cut ties with this hopeless man. The next day, I told everything to my parents, my in-laws, and Lucas, who was at his assignment location. Shocked and furious, they couldn't believe Oliver and Camila had an affair and were expecting a child. Despite their family's reactions, both were unapologetic and brazen. "All this is Asael's fault, right? If she's upset about the affair or didn't notice it, it's her own fault. If Lucas wants to blame someone, he should blame Asael." Camila even had the audacity to put the blame on me. Their lack of remorse disgusted everyone. Lucas decided to divorce Camila, and both Oliver and Camila were disowned by our parents and Lucas. Later, when I reported the situation to Mason, the concerned salon manager, he was one of our recommended hairstylists. "This could affect our salon's reputation. I need to think about what to do with Oliver. he said while crossing his arms. 3 months later, after Camila's remarriage prohibition period ended, she and Oliver got married. Yet, for some reason, I was getting calls from Oliver on my mobile phone. I was at work, and as far as I was concerned, he was a person from my past. I had nothing to say to him, yet he kept calling persistently if I ignored him. Oliver, still somehow keeping his job under Mason's management and working in the beauty salon on the second floor, was someone I don't want showing up at the flower shop. Reluctantly, I answered the call. "Hey, can you help me out here?" His voice was weak and pitiful, a far cry from his earlier bravado. "Why should I? I have no obligation to help you. Can you stop bothering me during work?" As I was about to hang up. "Don't be so cold. Can I come over to talk?" Oliver appeared to really want to talk. Not wanting him to actually come, I decided to listen. It turned out he was in quite a laughable predicament. According to Oliver, on the day they registered their marriage, Camila received a demand for alimony in a divorce lawsuit via a formal notice. "What's this about?" he questioned, and it turned out Camila had been having an affair with her boss, and his wife found out, demanding $50,000 in alimony. Moreover, she was pregnant, and it was unclear whether the child was Oliver's or her boss's. He might end up raising a child that isn't his. "I have no confidence in raising a child that might not be mine. Tell me how to get a divorce." His SOS to me was the last thing I needed. "Just say what you told me," was all the advice I gave. That's it. That was the last call I ever received from Oliver. Nevertheless, both my former sister-in-law and ex-husband were such despicable people. They were both broke after paying us alimony in the divorce suits. Oliver was likely to be fired by Mason now, and with Camila's affair scandal at work, she would probably be fired too, burdened with a hefty debt of $50,000 for alimony. What would they do now? Face bankruptcy? It seemed like a miserable life awaits them, socially and personally obliterated. As for me, I remarried a man who supplies flowers to my shop and am expecting a long-awaited child. I live happily, surrounded by beautiful flowers, a kind and honest husband, and looking forward to holding my lovely child. Despite being called plain, living true to myself is best. I've learned my lesson to stay away from smooth talkers and those who look down on others. Get back home and start cooking quickly. That was the first thing my husband blurted out over the phone while I was at work. When he got home, he was visibly upset that dinner wasn't ready. Even though I had explained to him that I'm in the middle of a big project at work and it's a crucial time, he still clings to the old-fashioned belief that housework is a woman's job. "You're obviously using work as an excuse to skip out on chores. I'll give you a piece of my mind when you get back." Despite having ended the call, my phone's notification light kept flashing incessantly. It was as if it was reflecting my husband's unending anger, causing me to sigh repeatedly. I'm Natalie, 40 years old. Earlier this year, I was promoted to a managerial position. Until I got married to Matthew, who is 6 years my senior, 3 years ago, my life was all about work. After getting married, I thought about scaling back my work, but then came the unexpected promotion. Now, with more responsibilities, my workload has only increased. Nonetheless, I've been trying to balance housework as best as I can. But feeling the strain of juggling both, I've asked Matthew to help out. "Please, can't you help out a bit with the chores?" "What? Why should I do it? I'm the head of this household. But we're a dual-income couple without kids. I think it's only fair you do some housework." Despite having those discussions many times, he eventually went and complained to my mother-in-law. Truth be told, mother-in-law is quite a tricky character. "Of course, the wife should do all the housework. You're failing as a wife," she would say. Every time I see her, she gives me a hard time. Plus, she, who loves designer brands, always mocks my work-appropriate jacket and pants style as drab and cheap. Before I knew it, I was constantly receiving snide remarks from my mother-in-law and fighting with my husband, who doesn't understand the concept of a dual-income couple. All this leaves me with little hope for the future and a growing sense of despair. Then, one day, as I finished work and opened the front door of my house, I saw in-laws' shoes. Are they both here? This is going to be troublesome. Just as I dreaded, my mother-in-law, standing tall, started lecturing me as expected. I've been waiting for you, Natalie. Leaving the house empty till this hour because of work. You really don't understand your role as a wife. Yeah, sorry. I replied, too tired to argue, enduring the hunger and her relentless sarcasm. While she was going on with her one-sided sermon, my father-in-law was lounging on the sofa, an annoying sight, but I couldn't bring myself to say anything. A wife who neglects her home is a worry for our old age. We should move in together immediately. That's a bit. Your opinion doesn't matter. We've already planned to move in with you and even arranged a mortgage for a suitable house. Standing beside her, my husband listened to our conversation, then confidently and excitedly approached me with his news. Seeing his proud face, she looked very pleased. I couldn't help but feel completely excluded. That's exactly why I don't want that. If you don't like living with my parents, then let's get a divorce. That's impossible. Because... He cut me off, refusing to listen and, as usual, imposing his own opinions. Then just do as I, the man of the house, say. Don't act so high and mighty just because you work at a major company. Women should be quiet and obedient. It crossed my mind that he might not even remember our previous discussions. They, apparently giving up on my input, were excitedly discussing the new house. We'll have separate entrances in the new house for us. You guys will want your own entrance, right? Feel free to boss Natalie around whenever you need. Thank you, you are so thoughtful. A wife is like a free housekeeper. I'll use her to my heart's content. Despite the headache-inducing conversation, with the house loan already taken, I had no choice but to let Matthew have his way. 2 weeks later, on my rare day off, my in-laws suddenly moved into our house. Without any prior notice, mother-in-law, with her piles of luggage, barged in as if she owned the place. Matthew was out, and when I tried to call him to figure out what was happening, he didn't answer. My mother-in-law, in her usual flashy, embroidered designer clothes, started ordering me around as if it was the most natural thing. My father-in-law sank deeply into the sofa, showing no intention of helping. Clear out those cheap bags and clothes from your room. We're using your closet and bed from today. A semi-double bed is too much for you. You can sleep in the hallway. What? Didn't you hear me? Get moving. Wait a minute. Weren't we supposed to move in together only after getting the new house? Our house sold quicker than expected. Starting today, I'm going to retrain you to be a proper wife. She twisted her mouth maliciously, seeming to enjoy the moment. She completely ignored everything I said. Just thinking about starting life with father-in-law, who wouldn't even move things in front of him, weighed heavily on my heart. Doing as I was told, I began taking my clothes and bags out of my room, to her satisfaction. You're always wearing the same clothes despite your good salary, and you don't even own a designer bag. Yeah, I don't really focus on that stuff. That's why you're so plain and boring. You must have a lot saved up since you don't spend. Not really. Lying again. She mocking laughter, now even more spiteful, made me feel like she was targeting my savings. Also, you'll be buying all new appliances and furniture when we move to the new house. We only brought our clothes and newly acquired golf gear. She made decisions without listening to my opinion. Biting back what I wanted to say, I focused on tidying up. Not owning much, I quickly moved my belongings from my room to storage. Now it's time to store our important stuff. Hurry up! I placed her clothes and father-in-law's golf bags in the closet I had been using. She looked very satisfied watching this. As I was finishing up, my husband returned home and happily addressed me, seeing the situation. First of all, it was a luxury for a wife like you to even have a room. Leave it to my mother, and you'll become a proper wife. This is just the beginning. I'll drill into you what it means to be a wife." True to her word, the next day I was woken up at dawn to prepare breakfast for everyone, including sandwiches I had never before made for my husband. My mother-in-law just watched, offering no help. After completing everything and heading to work, she would call to order me to do shopping, and upon returning home, there was no rest, only dinner preparation. By the time I finished washing the dishes, my husband and mother-in-law were enjoying their shower time. Exhausted, as I headed to shower, she added, "Use the stored water in the bathtub to wash yourself. You don't get the luxury of a shower." Entering the shower room silently, I found the water dirty and unappealing. "Remember, use the stored water." I was shocked when the shower door suddenly opened. All I wanted was some privacy in the shower, but she wouldn't even allow me that. Why must I endure this when I'm the one paying the high heating bill? I'm so tired. Why are wives always looked down upon, regardless of the era? I could just refuse, but to avoid further conflicts, I told myself it was just temporary endurance. Of course, my husband showed no concern for me. In fact, he started exploiting me more. "Hey Natalie, bring me beer and snacks." Lately, he just lounged on the sofa, playing games. Angered, I glared at him, and he yelled back, "Don't get cocky. You just need to listen to me and my mother." I felt strongly that there was no one on my side in this house. A month into this hellish life, reaching my limit, I got a call from a real estate agent during lunch break. I had been secretly preparing to leave the house. Finally, the day I've been waiting for. I can be free. The next morning, with an innocent expression, I carried my suitcase to the living room where they were. "I'll be on a business trip to Los Angeles for a few days." What an arrogant way to say it. Make sure to buy gifts. Don't forget there's a mountain of housework waiting when you get back. And so, I left the house. The business trip was a lie. I moved into my new house straight after work. Alone for the first time in a while, I felt an overwhelming sense of happiness. From now on, I'll live for myself. I resolved in my heart. Starting that day, I blocked my husband's calls and cut off all communication. A week later, my husband, unable to hide his irritation at my not returning home, was lurking behind a pillar at my workplace. As soon as he saw me, he rushed over and grabbed my arm tightly. His eyes were wild, his face flushed, glaring at me threateningly. "I knew it. You were back from your trip already. Let's go home." "No, I'm not going back." "What nonsense are you spouting? How dare you, a wife, act like this? Do you want a divorce that badly?" "Yes. No one will take you in after me. Actually, we're already divorced, so we're strangers now. You haven't forgotten, have you?" "Huh? You slapped a divorce paper in my face 3 months ago after a huge fight." "What? Did you file it?" His voice trembled as he asked for confirmation. When I affirmed, he was visibly shocked and disoriented. In fact, before my in-laws arrived, he had suggested living together. I naturally refused, and in anger, he presented the divorce papers. I made good use of them. "But just recently, when I said if you didn't like living together we should divorce, you said that's impossible." "We're already divorced. It's ridiculous to live together when we're separated, isn't it?" "Then why were you living with us?" "I bought a new apartment but couldn't move in immediately. I was told it would take 1 to 2 months, and after spending much of my savings on the apartment, I couldn't afford a hotel." He was stunned, not only that the divorce was already final, but also that I had purchased an apartment. His previously flushed face turned pale. "Now that you understand, are we done here?" "Not at all. That's joint property, right? I bought it with money I saved before marriage, so it's my personal property." "Seriously? Oh, right. Your stuff is still there, come get it." "You're just saying that to get your parents to persuade me. I've seen through all your plans. I've packed everything I need in my suitcase. I've even reserved luxury furniture from famous brands." For a moment, he looked envious. Had he cherished me, this wouldn't have been the outcome. Such a pity. I don't accept this. I'm canceling the divorce. As I said, you're the one who slapped the divorce papers on me. Even if you take it to court, it'll be a waste of effort. Look, I'm in trouble without you. I can't pay off the mortgage for the house we bought together. I was counting on splitting it with you since you earn more. Then he started to cry. I was astonished to hear he relied on my salary to buy the house. Doing the math, at 45 years old, Matthew took out a 35-year mortgage. He'd be 80 by the time it's paid off. It's none of my concern now. You'll have to pay it all yourself. No, no, no. Don't be cold, help me find a solution. We were married once, after all. Your parents have the money from selling their house. Use that. Well, actually, they didn't sell the house. It was auctioned off due to my parents defaulting on the loan. What did they spend the money on? Designer clothes, bags, and Dad's expensive golf gear. I was shocked. They really intended to live off me. The day they moved in, my suspicion that they were after my money wasn't unfounded. I'm glad I divorced. I felt reassured about my decision. Despite their precarious situation, they gambled, hoping for a big win. They ended up borrowing dangerously and lost everything. Now, just paying the interest is a struggle. I refuse to spend my life with such people. Never contact me again. Then my ex-husband blurted out something ridiculous. The house we bought is joint property since we bought it before the divorce. What? You have a duty to pay the mortgage. It's in your name. If it's recently bought, selling it won't even cover the deficit. If you think I'm lying, check it out. Then let's get back together. I have no intention of returning to a husband who looks down on me as a wife. What nonsense he was speaking. He didn't understand how awful his actions were. Then lend me money. Sleep talking is meant to happen while you are sleeping. By the way, our joint savings had $10,000, so I took $5,000 as my share. Goodbye forever. If you ambush me again, I'll call the police. Matthew collapsed as if knocked out. I walked past him and returned to my home. Feeding their extravagant parents and paying the mortgage must be hellish. I didn't expect to be ambushed again, but just to be safe, I changed to a new mobile phone and got a different number. The house my ex-husband bought, intended for co-living, was auctioned off within a year due to my in-laws' presence causing delays in mortgage and property tax payments. Relying on my income for the new house, it was obviously difficult for them to make payments once I left. Later, my in-laws created more debt for themselves and failed to repay it, leading to debt collectors' arrival. I heard they were forced into labor at a place arranged by the collectors, having to give up their cherished designer items and luxury golf clubs. Matthew, of course, with no money, ended up living in an old apartment with dubious stains on the floor and no shower. In such a state, it's unlikely he'll find a new wife. I'm enjoying my days, excited about life in my new apartment. The freedom to live without anyone's orders, just relaxing, is blissful. Living alone is the best. My name is Alice. I've been married for 8 years and have a 6-year-old daughter, Laura, and a 4-year-old son, Eddie. My husband Sam was a colleague at the same company. When I was assigned to the same team, I was supposed to support him, but being new to the job, I often ended up receiving his support instead. I was drawn to his work ethic and kindness. We had a successful project, and a party was thrown to celebrate. He was the main contributor to the success, and naturally, the star of the party. Amidst everyone's praises, he took my hand and said, "I really appreciate Alice's support. This success is partly thanks to her." I responded, "I haven't done anything significant. Thank you though." But I was thrilled that he recognized my efforts. As the party ended and everyone was leaving, he and I ended up being alone together because we were heading in the same direction. It's odd to say this here, but I'd like to date you. I have feelings for you. Surprised and overjoyed by his sudden confession, I was filled with happiness. It was because I had also fallen for him. 6 months into our relationship, he proposed to me. The proposal came unexpectedly on our way back from watching a movie and having dinner together. I was so overwhelmed with happiness that tears came to my eyes. Why not in the restaurant we just left, but on this street? But then I remembered that he asked me out on the street too, and I couldn't help but laugh through my tears. He was a bit surprised by my reaction, but after hearing my explanation, he apologized saying, "Sorry for the lack of delicacy." We decided to get married and started making various preparations. Among them, greeting his parents was important. Actually, both of my parents had already passed away. My mother died of an illness when I was in junior high, and my father died in a sudden traffic accident the month I started working. Being an only child, I suddenly found myself alone. So, I felt both joy at the prospect of gaining new parents and anxiety about what these two people I had yet to meet would be like. According to him, his father Jack is strict but kind and is someone he respects greatly. Jack's also still working energetically as a director of a trading company. As for his mother Emily, a housewife who always supported Dad and who loved and raised me with care. Sam shared that with a bit of shyness. I was nervous when I greeted them. Jack said smiling, "I'm happy to have you in our family. If my son has chosen you, then I'm relieved." Emily also smiled saying so. We continued to discuss various things about the wedding and our future home as a group of 4. After the meal, while helping Emily with the dishes in the kitchen, just the two of us, she suddenly said, "I feel sorry that you have no parents, but I wonder if such a girl is really suitable to be Sam's wife." It came out of nowhere. She lost the friendliness I had felt until then and feeling belittled. I was stunned and didn't know how to respond. While washing the dishes, she continued to express her dissatisfaction towards me. Her calm tone seemed to reveal her true feelings, and I couldn't bear it anymore. She never showed any sign of belittling me or speaking ill of me in front of others. The huge gap in her attitude was terrifying to me. Nevertheless, the wedding was grand affair. Sam said, "It's a once-in-a-lifetime event for a woman," and planned it for me. Jack agreed with his idea and helped make it happen. Many people attended, including our company colleagues and Jack's business associates. That made it a lively ceremony. Sam and I had agreed to continue working until we had children. However, it seemed that Emily disapproved of it. When I was alone with her in the dressing room before the wedding, she whispered in my ear, "So, you're continuing your job. A wife should support her husband." Poor Sam. "I quit my job right away to support my husband." She said that with a tone of sarcasm. There was a staff member from the venue in the dressing room to help us prepare, so I think Emily was discreet for their sake. I felt a strong will in her to never reveal her true nature or true feelings to anyone. After the wedding, we rented a roomy house close to my in-laws' house. It was a large property for just the two of us. "Let's choose a house with enough room for our future children." It was the room that Sam had decided on. After a delightful honeymoon, we began our life in our new home and decided to invite my in-laws over for dinner. Upon seeing the new home, Jack said, "It's a splendid house." He highly praised it. Emily just smiled and agreed with him. Based on past experiences, I could imagine what Emily was thinking and felt creeped out. After dinner, they left thoroughly pleased. I felt somewhat exhausted and just sat in a chair, zoning out. Sam noticed and asked what was wrong, but it was difficult to explain, so I responded, "I'm just a little tired." Late that night, there was a call on my cell phone. When I looked at the screen, it was from Emily. I hesitated for a moment, and it took me a little longer to answer the phone. "You took a while to answer. Were you planning not to pick up?" "No, that's not it," I said. "However, I wonder." She coldly responded, "Most of the dishes today were delivered. It's clear you're taking the easy way out. The dishes you made weren't impressive and they were bland. I'm worried about Sam's diet." She started by criticizing my cooking and then complained about everything from how the room was organized to the interior design. Just listening to her was tiring. Since there had been no chance for us to be alone today, she used the phone to express her feelings. That night, due to the exhaustion, I couldn't fall asleep and it affected my return to work the next day. Since our new home was close to my in-laws, Emily frequently visited. Sam was simply happy that his mother was coming over, but for me, even our precious days off weren't restful. I knew Emily's ways all too well, so I made sure to act smartly to avoid being alone with her as much as possible. When Sam was with us, she was a pleasant mother-in-law. But knowing her drastic changes, even that felt eerie and frightening to me. Whenever I acted to avoid being alone with her, there would inevitably follow a barrage of phone calls. Each call would last over 30 minutes, filled with complaints and snide remarks that left me exhausted. If I tried to ignore them, she'd sense it and become even angrier. I was at a loss about what to do. 2 years into our marriage, we were blessed with a child. Sam was overjoyed. When we went to inform my in-laws, Jack's happiness rivaled Sam's. Even Emily seemed genuinely happy at the prospect of holding a grandchild, but her true feelings became clear later. I always made sure not to be alone with Emily, but this time Jack and Sam were pulled away for work-related calls, leaving us alone. As expected, she said. Really, it took you 2 years because you kept working after marriage. I always thought you were a useless wife, but you just barely made it this time. It seemed she was always displeased with me continuing my job. Emily, now that we've been blessed with a child, and as I've discussed with Sam, I'll be quitting my job soon to focus on parenting and the household. I explained her, but her complaints continued. The return of Jack and Sam from their calls thankfully ended the conversation. About 5 months later, I resigned from my job. On my last day, the bouquet I received from my colleagues was the most delightful thing. 3 months after that, I safely gave birth to a baby girl. It was an easy birth for my first child, and I was able to leave the hospital early to start our new life as a family of 3. We soon invited my in-laws over to introduce them to our daughter, Laura. Jack looked at his granddaughter with joy. When he offered his little finger, Laura gripped it tightly, a natural reflex for babies, but he was delighted. I remembered Sam doing the same thing a couple of days ago, skipping around happily. I thought Emily would surely be satisfied holding her adorable grandchild, but I was naive. That night, I received another call from her. It's fine that you have a grandchild, but why a girl? The first one should have been a boy. She blamed me for not giving birth to a male heir, despite Sam being happy with our child regardless of gender. I don't want to be criticized for something like that. Feeling like our child's worth was being denied, I finally stood up to her. She was angry at my rare resistance and became even more sarcastic. It felt like my child was being ridiculed, and I couldn't take it anymore, so I finally told Sam about it. I had never really spoken to him about Emily before, and he seemed quite surprised. He also said, "I can't stand the way Mom talks down to Laura." And he apologized to me. "I'm sorry for all the trouble you've been through." He promised that from now on, we would keep some distance from Emily. After that, our interactions with her decreased, and so did the harassment from her. Perhaps because I felt more secure in parenting and my life with Sam, we were blessed with another child when Laura turned 2. Then, our son was born. Sam's joy at that time was even greater than before. "Did you prefer having a boy?" I asked. "That doesn't matter. I'm just so happy that Laura has a little brother." He smiled. We reported the birth of our son Eddie to my in-laws and showed them his face. Jack was overjoyed just like Sam and congratulated us on having 2 children. As for Emily, it was the same as when Laura was born. On the phone, she said, "You finally gave birth to a boy. At least you've been somewhat useful now. But I wonder if someone like you can properly raise an important heir. The daughter doesn't seem to be raised well either." Even at a young age, Laura seemed to sense the negative aura emanating from Emily. She was very fond of Jack, but she didn't get close to her much. That seemed to be a source of dissatisfaction for Emily. Ironically, the root cause was her own behavior, yet she seemed oblivious to this fact. Unable to bear her criticizing my children, I told Sam about it. When I played a recording of my conversation with Emily as evidence, he sighed and shook his head. We decided once again to keep our distance from her. Peaceful days returned to me. Time passed, and Laura turned 6, while Eddie became 4 years old. One time, Jack had to go on a long business trip overseas. The company was focusing on expanding its business and increasing dealings with foreign partners, and he was going as the person in charge of the initiative. A week after Jack left, Emily suddenly visited our house. Moreover, she brought a lot of baggage with her. When I asked what was going on, she said, Jack is away now and I was bored, so I decided to come and stay. I'll be in your care. Besides, it looks like you might be getting busier, right? I'll help out around the house for a bit. Actually, just the other day, can you help me with my work? A friend had asked me. The friend owns an interior shop and suddenly one of her employees had quit, leaving her short-staffed, just until I can find a replacement. She said, I was considering the offer since my children were still young. I was puzzled about how Emily knew about it, but I was more shocked by her sudden decision to move in. Unable to send her away, I let Emily into the house, and she quickly started organizing her belongings. That evening, when Sam came home, I told him about it. He was also surprised by Emily's sudden arrival. She knew about the work request because Sam had told her. He had accidentally mentioned it while contacting her for a different matter. The thought of living with her was dizzying to me. I asked Sam, can you talk to Emily and get her to go home? But he said, it's only for a short while, and it'll make it easier for you to take up your friend's request. So, Emily's stay was decided. I was relieved that I could go to work and be away from her, but I was terribly worried about leaving the children in her care. I felt like the children were being held hostage by her, leaving me restless. The kids talked to me about their interactions with Emily. It seemed that she was only paying attention to Eddie. Perhaps because he's the heir, Laura said. It's sad. And shed tears. Her sarcasm continued, pushing me to the edge. Combined with the fatigue from the unfamiliar job, I was nearing my limit. Seeing my distress, Sam listened to me. He said, I can't overlook this anymore. And gave me some advice. Just like before, when I recorded my call with Emily, start collecting evidence. He had instructed. He handed me a voice recorder and a video camera. The next day, I began recording all of Emily's sarcasms. I set up the video in the living room and carried the voice recorder during conversations with her. Although her attacks continued, the thought of standing up to her gave me mental strength. As the evidence accumulated, I was strangely surprised by how much could be gathered in such a short period. Finally, she demanded that I divorce Sam and leave the house. The nerve of a parasite dictating terms in my family's home brought me to my breaking point. I discussed with Sam and decided to take action. Get out! When Emily said, understood, then it's goodbye. Hearing that, thinking she had one. Finally, even someone as stupid as you understands. But what a terrible wife, leaving your children behind. She laughed and said, no, it's you who will be leaving. That's why I said goodbye. Hearing it, what are you talking about? Ignoring her anger, I pulled out my cell phone and made a call. Once the person on the other end answered, I handed the phone to her. Her face visibly paled as she took the call. The person on the line was Jack, who was overseas. What are you doing, leaving our home unattended like this? Isn't it a wife's duty to protect her home? You've been harassing Alice? What is the meaning of this? Unable to respond to his words, Emily filled with anger. She began to sweat profusely, and her eyes turned vacant. I had asked Sam to gather substantial evidence, which we then sent to Jack overseas. In today's age, whether someone is overseas or anywhere else, data can be sent with just a click. I've seen the terrible things you've done. I won't hear any excuses. Among the evidence was a video of Emily taking money from my wallet. I had been worried about my money disappearing mysteriously, but I never thought it was her. Jack told her, go back home immediately and reflect on your actions. Moreover, I'll be returning home temporarily and we'll have a talk then. Saying so, he ended the call. After hanging up, Emily quickly packed her things in a daze and fled back to her own home. Later, when Jack returned temporarily, he lectured her and even considered divorce, completely breaking her down. After the incident, she never interfered with me again. Laura and Eddie said, Mommy would never leave us. Grandma doesn't understand anything. That's right. I would never abandon my precious family. Sam stood by me. I am resolved to cherish this family always. Thus, a peaceful life came to our family of 4.